The mare appeared like a ghost through the swirling white hell, blood frozen to her flanks, eyes wild with terror that went beyond the storm. Raina Calloway knew horses, had spent 37 years reading their language, and this one was screaming a message she couldn't ignore. Strapped to the saddle, barely visible beneath accumulating snow, was a leather pouch. Inside, scrawled in desperate handwriting, Harper Vance, cabin 14 miles northeast, dying, please. The wind howled like something alive and hungry. Raina looked at the darkening sky, then at the trembling mare, and made the choice that would either save 2 lives or end them all. If you're drawn into stories of impossible choices and the raw courage it takes to face death itself, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels across the world. The sky over Montana's Bitterroot Valley had been lying all morning. Raina Calloway stood on the weathered porch of her ranch house, coffee cooling in her calloused hands, watching the deception unfold. The clouds hung low and gray, innocent as dishwater, but the air tasted wrong, metallic, electric, the kind of wrong that lived in your bones before your brain caught up. She'd learned to read this language when she was 7 years old. The winter her father had ignored the signs and lost half their cattle to a surprise blizzard. 23 animals frozen solid in the north pasture, their bodies like grim statues until the thaw. Her father had never forgiven himself. Raina had never forgotten the lesson. "You're coming," she said to the sky. "Question is when?" The thermometer outside the kitchen window read 42 degrees. By nightfall, it would be below zero. She could feel it in the stillness. That particular quality of silence that meant the world was holding its breath before the violence began. Raina drained her coffee and set the mug on the porch rail. No time for ceremony. The cattle needed to be brought in from the high pasture. The horses needed extra hay in the barn. The generator needed fuel. The medical kit needed checking. A sound stopped her mid-thought. Distant, rhythmic, wrong. She tilted her head, listening past the whisper of wind through the ponderosa pines. There it was again. Hoofbeats, but irregular, stumbling. Raina's hand moved automatically to the rifle by the door, old habit from the years when wolves had been a problem, then stopped. Wolves didn't sound like that. This was something hurt, something desperate. She stepped off the porch, boots crunching on gravel, and rounded the corner of the house toward the sound. What she saw made her breath catch. A horse, a mare, maybe 15 hands high, Arabian bloodlines showing in the delicate dish of her face. She was the color of smoke and just as insubstantial in the growing gloom, appearing between the fence posts like something conjured from the approaching storm. But it was the state of her that turned Raina's stomach. The mare's coat was dark with sweat despite the dropping temperature. Foam flecked her chest and shoulders. Her legs trembled with exhaustion, and there was blood, not fresh, but frozen in rust-colored streaks along her flanks. The saddle sat crooked on her back, one stirrup missing, the leather reins dragging in the dirt. No rider. "Easy," Raina murmured, approaching slowly with her hands visible. "Easy now." The mare's ears swiveled toward her voice, but the horse didn't run. That alone told Raina everything she needed to know about the animal's condition. A healthy horse, riderless and frightened, would bolt. This one was too far gone. Raina closed the distance slowly, noting details with the practiced eye of someone who'd been raising horses since before she could read. The saddle was good quality, well maintained, custom stitching along the pommel. The bridle had silver conchos, expensive taste or sentimental value. The horse herself was well fed, well trained, someone's beloved companion, not just livestock. "Where's your rider, girl?" Raina asked softly, reaching out to touch the mare's neck. The horse flinched but didn't pull away. Up close, Raina could see the wild look in her eyes, not just fear, but something more purposeful. Urgency. That's when she noticed the pouch. It was strapped to the saddle horn with leather ties, the kind of waterproof bag hunters used for keeping matches dry. Someone had secured it with deliberate care, making sure it wouldn't come loose no matter how rough the ride. Raina's fingers fumbled with the frozen knots. The first fat snowflakes were beginning to fall, landing on her hands like cold coins. The temperature was dropping fast now. She could feel it in the sudden bite of the wind. The pouch came free. Inside was a piece of paper folded once, and something else, a small bottle of pills. Raina pulled out the paper and unfolded it. The handwriting was shaky, pressed hard into the page like the writer's hand had been trembling. To whoever finds Ash. My name is Harper Vance. I'm at my cabin approximately 14 miles northeast of Callaway Ranch. I fell 3 days ago. Hip broken, maybe worse. Can't walk, can't reach help. Phone dead. Radio dead. Ash is trained for distance. I sent her for help. I'm dying. Please. The bottle has my address on it. Please come. I don't want to die alone. The last line was written lighter, shakier, like the author had been crying or running out of strength, or both. Raina stared at the note for a long moment, her mind racing through calculations and impossibilities. 14 miles northeast. That would put Harper somewhere in the Lost Creek drainage, where the terrain turned rough and the cabins were few and far between. Raina knew the area, had ridden it in summer, hunted elk there in fall. Beautiful country. Deadly country if you were hurt and alone. She looked at the pill bottle. The label read, Harper Vance, 247 Lost Creek Road. The mare, Ash, nudged Raina's shoulder, nearly knocking her off balance. When Raina looked into the horse's eyes, she saw something she'd only seen a handful of times in her life. Intelligence, purpose, a message as clear as words. Come, now, please. The first gust of real wind hit like a fist, sending snow swirling in eddies across the yard. Raina looked at the sky. The lie had ended. The storm was here. Damn it, she whispered. 14 miles in a blizzard was suicide. Even on a good horse, in good weather, that was an hour's hard ride through difficult country. In a storm like this, the kind that could drop 2 feet of snow in as many hours, that could reduce visibility to arm's length, that could kill with cold as brutal as any predator. It was impossible. The smart play was obvious. Get on the radio, call it into search and rescue, let the professionals handle it. They had snowmobiles, GPS, proper gear. That was the protocol. That was the safe choice. Raina pulled her radio from her belt and keyed the mic. Static. She tried again. More static, shot through with the whine of electromagnetic interference. The storm was already playing hell with the signal. Callaway Ranch to Valley emergency. Do you copy? Nothing but white noise. She tried her cell phone. No signal. The nearest tower was 20 miles west, and in weather like this, it might as well be on the moon. Raina stood in her yard, snow falling harder now, and felt the weight of the choice settling on her shoulders like a physical thing. Harper Vance was dying alone. Had been dying for 3 days already, if the note was accurate. How much time did she have left? Hours? Minutes? And how long before search and rescue could mount a response in this weather? They'd have to wait for the storm to pass. That was standard procedure. Safe. Sensible. Harper would be dead by then. The wind gusted again, stronger, and Ash whinnied, not in fear but in frustration. The mare's meaning was clear. Why are we still standing here? You're insane, Raina said aloud, though she wasn't sure if she was talking to the horse or herself. This is insane. But even as she said it, her body was already moving, muscle memory and decision converging. She grabbed Ash's reins and started leading her toward the barn, moving fast now, mind already cataloging what she'd need. Her own horse, Dakota, was a steady gelding who'd carried her through worse than this. Medical kit, the good one, with the trauma supplies. Emergency blanket, flares, rope, extra layers. The satellite beacon she'd bought 3 years ago and never needed. Food, water, ammunition for the rifle, just in case. You're going to get yourself killed, she muttered, hauling open the barn door. The warmth and smell of horses and hay enveloped her. Dakota raised his head from his feed, ears pricked forward in interest. He was a buckskin, broad-chested and strong, with the kind of steady temperament that didn't panic in a crisis. We're going for a ride, Raina told him. Probably the stupidest ride of our lives. The barn became a flurry of efficient motion. Raina had spent decades preparing for emergencies. It was how you survived out here, where help was measured in hours, not minutes. Every action was practiced, automatic. Saddle Dakota. Check the girth twice. Medical kit in the left saddlebag. Emergency supplies in the right. Rifle in the scabbard. Extra ammunition in her jacket pocket. Layer up.
Thermal underwear, wool shirt, insulated vest, waterproof outer shell, gloves, hat, scarf, goggles for the wind. She worked fast, but her hands were steady. Fear was useful if you controlled it, deadly if you didn't. Ash watched from the stall where Raina had put her, munching hay with mechanical determination. The mare was exhausted, but there was still that light in her eyes, that urgency. "I'm coming," Raina told her. "I just need you to tell me you can make it back." She approached the stall and examined Ash more carefully. The blood on her flanks was from scrapes, brush probably, or a fall. Nothing deep. Her legs were sound, no heat or swelling. The exhaustion was profound, but not beyond recovery. If Raina took it slow, if she let Dakota break trail, Ash might make it. Might being the operative word. Raina pulled out her satellite beacon and activated it. The device was designed for emergencies exactly like this. Press the button, and it would send her GPS coordinates and a distress signal to emergency services. It wouldn't get help here any faster, but at least if she and Harper both died out there, someone would know where to find the bodies. Cheerful thought. She clipped the beacon to her belt, then added one more item to her gear, a headlamp. The storm would bring early darkness, and she'd need both hands free. "Okay," she said to Dakota as she led him out of the stall. "Here's the deal. 14 miles through a blizzard to save someone I've never met. You keep your footing, I'll keep us on course. Deal?" Dakota snorted and nuzzled her shoulder, his version of agreement. Raina looked at Ash. "You're going to have to show us the way, girl. Think you can do that?" The mare's ears came forward, and she pawed at the stall door. The message was clear. "All right, then." Raina led both horses out of the barn and into the full fury of the storm. It had transformed in the 20 minutes she'd been inside. The casual snowfall had become a driving wall of white, the wind a living thing that grabbed and pulled. Visibility was already down to maybe 50 feet. The temperature had dropped 15 degrees. This was a killer storm. The kind that made the news, the kind that left bodies frozen in their trucks. Raina swung up into Dakota's saddle and took Ash's reins in her left hand. The mare fell into step beside them without being asked, her head low against the wind, but her direction certain. Northeast, into the mountains, into the storm. "Last chance to change your mind," Raina said to herself. But she was already moving, and somewhere 14 miles away, Harper Vance was dying alone. And some choices weren't really choices at all. They left the ranch yard at a steady walk, Dakota's hooves crunching through the rapidly accumulating snow. The familiar landmarks, the fence line, the old cottonwood, the cattle guard at the property line, disappeared into white chaos within minutes. The world shrank to a bubble of visibility maybe 30 feet across. Beyond that, nothing but wind and snow and the terrible, certain knowledge that she was riding into the kind of weather that didn't forgive mistakes. Raina pulled her scarf up over her nose and mouth, adjusted her goggles, and settled deeper into the saddle. Ash moved alongside them with the determination of a horse on a mission, her exhaustion overridden by something stronger. The miles ahead would be brutal. The cold would be merciless. The storm would do everything in its power to kill them. But Raina Calloway had been forged in this country, tempered by loss and isolation, and she'd learned long ago that survival wasn't about avoiding danger. It was about facing it with your eyes open and your will unbreakable. They rode northeast into the teeth of the storm, toward a woman they'd never met, and a night that would test every limit they had. Behind them, the ranch disappeared into white silence. Ahead, somewhere it's a frozen darkness, Harper Vance was counting the hours until death, and between them, the clock was ticking. The first hour was the easiest, which wasn't saying much. Raina kept them to established trails when she could find them, following the contours of the land she'd known all her life. The first few miles led through rolling pasture land, open enough that the wind had full rein, but familiar enough that she could navigate by memory even as the landmarks vanished. Ash stayed close, sometimes leading, sometimes falling back, but always pulling northeast with that uncanny sense of direction. Horses had a talent for finding their way home. Raina had seen it before, but this was different. Ash wasn't heading home. She was heading back to Harper, and the distinction mattered. "Smart girl," Raina murmured, her words stolen by the wind. "Good girl." The snow fell harder. What had started as flakes became pellets, then back to flakes again, heavy and wet. It clung to everything.
The horses' manes, Reyna's jacket, the leather of the saddles.
The temperature continued to drop, and Reyna could feel the moisture beginning to freeze, turning the world into crystal. Dakota plodded forward with the patience of a seasoned trail horse, his breath coming in great plumes of steam. His ears swiveled constantly, tracking sounds Reyna couldn't hear over the wind. The crack of a branch, the rustle of something in the brush, the thousand small noises that meant they weren't alone in the wilderness. Reyna checked her compass every 10 minutes, though Ash's direction was proving more reliable than the needle. Northeast. Always northeast. The terrain was beginning to rise now, the easy rolls giving way to steeper climbs as they approached the foothills. This was where it would get dangerous. Lost Creek drainage was beautiful in summer, a series of narrow valleys cut by fast-running streams, thick with pine and aspen, dotted with meadows where elk grazed. But in winter, in a storm, those narrow valleys became wind tunnels. Those streams became ice traps. Those thick forests became mazes where you could ride in circles until hypothermia took you. Reyna knew this country, but not well enough to navigate it blind. She'd been through here maybe a dozen times in her life, always in good weather, always with time to learn the landmarks. Now those landmarks were gone, buried under snow and darkness. She checked her watch. 4:47 p.m. Sunset was at 5:15, though the storm had already stolen most of the light. In another half hour, it would be full dark. "Come on, girl," Reyna said to Ash. "Don't let me down now." The mare pushed forward, and Reyna gave Dakota his head, letting the gelding follow. They climbed. The wind grew teeth. It didn't just blow, it attacked, finding every gap in Reyna's clothing, every exposed inch of skin. Her face went numb despite the scarf. Her hands ached inside insulated gloves. The cold was a physical presence, a predator stalking them through the white. Dakota stumbled on a hidden root and caught himself. Reyna's heart lurched. One bad fall out here, one broken leg, and the mission was over. She'd have to shoot her horse and try to walk out, which was a death sentence in weather like this. "Easy," she murmured, patting his neck. "Easy does it." They reached the tree line and the forest closed around them like a fist. Here, the wind was fragmented by the pines, coming in gusts and eddies instead of one sustained assault. But the snow fell thicker, weighted down by branches before slumping to the ground in heavy dumps. Visibility shrank to 20 feet. 10. Reyna pulled out her headlamp and switched it on. The beam cut through the falling snow, creating a tunnel of light that revealed tree trunks and brush, but little else. The world became a procession of shadows and white, disconnected from any sense of scale or distance. Time began to lose meaning. There was only the next tree, the next step, the next breath. Ash led them through the forest with a confidence that bordered on supernatural. She navigated around deadfalls Reyna couldn't see until they were right on top of them. She found game trails that offered easier passage. She seemed to know exactly where she was going, even when Reyna had no idea. "You've done this run before, haven't you?" Reyna said. "Harper's ridden you out here, taught you the trails." Ash's ears flicked back, acknowledging the voice. They rode for another hour. The darkness grew complete, broken only by Reyna's headlamp and the ghostly white of the snow. The cold deepened, moving past discomfort into the realm of genuine danger. Reyna could feel it in her feet, going numb despite the insulated boots. In her hands, even through the gloves. Hypothermia was a clock and it was ticking. She checked her GPS. 7 miles from the ranch. 7 more to go. Halfway. If Harper was still alive. If Reyna didn't freeze to death first. If the horses didn't collapse from exhaustion. If. Keep moving, she told herself. Just keep moving. Dakota's pace had slowed. Not much. He was still game, still pushing, but Reyna could feel the weariness in his gait. Ash was running on fumes and willpower, her head lower now, her steps less certain. They needed rest. They needed warmth. They needed things this storm wasn't going to give them. Reyna dug in her saddlebag and pulled out an energy bar. It was frozen solid, but she managed to break off pieces with her teeth. The calories would help, even if she couldn't taste anything through the cold. She ate mechanically, focused on the trail ahead, and almost missed the sound. At first she thought it was the wind, a new variation in its endless howl. But then it came again, and her blood went cold. Howling. Real howling. Wolves. Reyna's hand went to the rifle scabbard, her fingers clumsy with cold. The wolves in this region didn't usually bother humans, but a storm could make any animal desperate, and the smell of horses, tired and vulnerable, might be too tempting to pass up. The howl came again, closer, and Dakota's ears went flat against his head. Ash stopped dead, her nostrils flaring. Raina pulled the rifle free and jacked around into the chamber. The sound was sharp and clear even over the wind, a promise and a warning. "Not today," she said quietly. "Not my horses. Not on my watch." She scanned the darkness beyond her headlamp's reach, looking for the shine of eyes, the movement of shadows. The forest was alive with potential threats, every shape a possible predator. The howling stopped. Raina waited, heart pounding, rifle ready. Seconds stretched. A minute. 2. Nothing. Either the wolves had decided easier prey was elsewhere, or they were still out there, watching, waiting for a moment of weakness. Raina didn't lower the rifle for another 5 minutes. When she finally slid it back into the scabbard, her hands were shaking, though whether from cold or adrenaline she couldn't tell. "Let's move," she said, before they changed their minds. They pushed on, and the forest began to change around them. The pines grew taller, older, their trunks massive and dark. The terrain steepened, forcing them to zigzag back and forth to find passable routes. Raina's sense of direction was thoroughly scrambled now. She had no idea if they were still heading northeast or if they'd gotten turned around in the darkness. But Ash kept moving with purpose, and Raina had to trust her. Trust. It was the only thing she had left. The hours bled together. Cold. Dark. Motion. The repetitive crunch of hooves through snow. The endless wind. The ache in every muscle, every joint. Raina drifted in and out of focus, aware that this was dangerous. The first sign of hypothermia was mental fog, but unable to stop it. She thought about Harper, alone in a cabin, broken and dying. What had she been doing when she fell? Was anyone looking for her? Did she have family, friends who were worried? Would they arrive to find her already dead? Raina shook her head, trying to clear the dark thoughts. Focus, just focus on the next mile, the next 100 yards, the next step. Dakota stumbled again, more seriously this time, and Raina had to grab the saddle horn to keep from pitching forward. The gelding caught himself, but Raina could feel how tired he was. They all were. "Just a little further," she whispered, though she had no idea if that was true. "We're close. We have to be close." Ash raised her head suddenly, ears pricked forward, and whinnied. It was the first real sound the mare had made since arriving at the ranch, and it cut through the storm like a bell. Ahead, barely visible through the snow and darkness, was a shape, a building. Raina's heart leaped. She urged Dakota forward, Ash surging ahead now, the mare's exhaustion forgotten in her urgency. The shape resolved as they got closer. A cabin, small and sturdy, built from logs with a metal roof already buried under a foot of snow. A single window glowed faintly, lamplight, barely visible but unmistakable. Someone was inside. Raina dismounted before Dakota had fully stopped, her legs nearly buckling as her boots hit the snow. She grabbed the horse's reins and led them to a small lean-to beside the cabin, shelter from the worst of the wind. It would have to do. Then she grabbed her medical kit and ran for the cabin door. She didn't knock. There wasn't time for courtesy. The door swung open, and warmth, blessed, beautiful warmth, washed over her. The cabin was tiny, one room, lit by a single oil lamp. A wood stove glowed in the corner, and on the floor, wrapped in blankets barely visible, was a woman. Harper Vance. She was conscious, barely. Her face was pale, her lips tinged blue. Her eyes opened at the sound of the door, and for a moment she just stared at Raina like she was seeing a ghost. "You came," Harper whispered. Her voice was barely audible, cracked from dehydration and pain. "You actually came." Raina dropped to her knees beside her, already pulling off her gloves, checking for a pulse. It was there, weak, thready, but there. "I'm here," Raina said. "You're going to be okay. I'm going to get you through this." Harper's eyes filled with tears. "I thought I was going to die alone." "Not today," Raina said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. "Not on my watch." The storm howled outside, shaking the cabin walls, and the night stretched ahead, long and uncertain. But they'd made it. Against impossible odds, through killing weather, guided by a horse who refused to give up, they'd made it. Now came the harder part, keeping Harper alive until help could arrive. Raina looked at the woman on the floor, at the cabin barely holding back the storm, and felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. She'd ridden through hell to get here. Now she had to make sure it was worth it. The warmth of the cabin was almost painful after hours in the freezing wind. Raina's face burned as blood rushed back to frozen skin, her fingers screaming with pins and needles as she stripped off her wet outer layers. But there was no time to adjust, no luxury of easing into comfort. Harper's condition demanded immediate attention. Raina knelt beside the woman, her medical training kicking in with automatic precision. Check airways, breathing, circulation.
Harper was conscious but drifting, her pupils dilated with pain and shock. Her skin was cold to the touch, clammy. Classic signs of shock, maybe internal bleeding. "Harper, can you hear me?" Raina asked, keeping her voice calm and steady. "I need you to stay with me. Tell me what happened." Harper's eyes focused with effort.
Up close, Raina could see she was younger than expected. Maybe early 30s, with dark hair matted to her forehead and cheekbones too sharp from days without proper food. Her right leg was bent at an unnatural angle beneath the blankets. "Fell," Harper managed, her voice barely above a whisper. 3 days ago. Was checking the roof line. Ice. Went down hard on the rocks behind the cabin." "Your hip?" "Hip, maybe pelvis. Can't move without—" She trailed off, her face contorting with remembered pain. Raina pulled back the blankets carefully, assessing the damage. Harper was wearing thermal underwear and wool socks, but the layers couldn't hide the massive bruising that spread across her right hip and thigh. Purple and black, the kind of impact trauma that spoke of broken bones and damaged tissue. "I'm going to examine you," Raina said. "It's going to hurt. I'm sorry." Harper nodded, her jaw clenched. Raina's hands moved with practiced efficiency, palpating the injured area with as much gentleness as she could manage. Harper's breathing went ragged, small sounds of agony escaping despite her obvious attempts to stay quiet. The hip was definitely broken. Raina could feel the instability, the grinding sensation of bone fragments. Whether the pelvis was fractured too was impossible to tell without an X-ray, but the extent of the bruising suggested it was likely. "Okay," Raina said, pulling the blankets back over Harper. "You've got a broken hip, possibly pelvic fractures. Have you been able to move at all?" "Crawled inside the first day," Harper said. "Took me 4 hours to drag myself 20 feet. Thought I was going to pass out. After that," she shook her head. "Too weak. Too much pain." Raina looked around the cabin, taking quick inventory. It was sparse but functional, a wood stove in the corner still burning low, a small table with the oil lamp, shelves with canned goods and supplies, a cot against the far wall that Harper must have been trying to reach when she collapsed, a bucket in the corner that Raina tried not to think about. "You've been here alone this whole time?" "I come up here to write," Harper said. "Novel, needed isolation. Got more than I bargained for." A ghost of a smile crossed her pale lips. "Phone died the second day. Radio's batteries gave out yesterday. I sent Ash because—" her voice cracked, "because I didn't know what else to do." "You did the right thing," Raina said firmly. "That horse just rode 14 miles through a blizzard to bring me here. She's a hell of a lot tougher than she looks." "Is she okay? Ash, is she—" "She's fine. Exhausted, but fine. She's sheltered with my horse." Relief flooded Harper's face, and tears spilled down her cheeks. "Thank you. Thank you for coming. I really thought I was going to die here." "You're not dying," Raina said with more confidence than she felt. "But we need to get you stabilized. When did you last eat? Drink water?" "Water this morning. Managed to reach the jug I keep by the stove. Food." Harper's brow furrowed. "Yesterday? Maybe?" "It's hard to remember. Everything's been blurring together. Severe dehydration, malnutrition, shock, hypothermia. The list of life-threatening conditions was stacking up." Raina dug through her medical kit, pulling out supplies. 4 would be ideal, but she didn't have the equipment for that. Oral rehydration would have to do, slow and careful to avoid aspiration. She filled a cup with water from her canteen and added an electrolyte packet, mixing it carefully. "I need you to drink this. Small sips. Too much too fast and you'll vomit, and we don't need that complication." Harper took the cup with shaking hands. Raina had to help support it, tipping small amounts past cracked lips. Harper drank like someone who'd been lost in the desert, desperate and grateful. Slower, Raina cautioned. I know you're thirsty, but slow. It took 10 minutes to get half the cup down. Raina used the time to conduct a more thorough examination, checking for other injuries, assessing circulation in Harper's legs, monitoring her vital signs as best she could without proper equipment. The broken hip was the primary concern, but there could be internal injuries she couldn't see. Internal bleeding was the nightmare scenario. Nothing she could do about that out here except keep Harper stable and pray help arrived in time. The storm hammered against the cabin walls, a constant reminder that they were trapped. Raina checked her satellite beacon. The signal was transmitting, the little light blinking steadily. Search and rescue would have her coordinates, but in weather like this, they wouldn't be able to launch until the storm passed. That could be hours, could be days. They were on their own. I'm going to give you some pain medication, Raina said, pulling a bottle from her kit. It's going to help, but it might make you drowsy. That's okay. Your body needs rest. Will you stay? Harper asked, and there was such naked fear in her voice that Raina's chest tightened. I'm not going anywhere, Raina promised. You're stuck with me until help arrives. She administered the medication, a carefully measured dose, enough to take the edge off, but not so much that it would depress Harper's already compromised breathing. Then she set about making Harper as comfortable as possible. Extra blankets from her pack, a rolled jacket under her head for a pillow. The wood stove stoked to push more heat into the small space. Tell me about Ash, Raina said as she worked, knowing that keeping Harper talking would help monitor her consciousness. How long have you had her? Harper's expression softened. 5 years. Bought her from a trainer in Missoula. She was green-broke, skittish. Everyone said she'd never be reliable, too flighty. But I saw something in her. Patience, intelligence. She paused to take another careful sip of water. Spent a year just building trust. Another year teaching her trails. She knows this country better than most people. She saved your life, Raina said. That's a hell of a horse. She saved both our lives, Harper corrected quietly. If you hadn't come. Raina didn't let her finish that thought. But I did. Now let's focus on keeping you alive until the cavalry arrives. She pulled out her radio and tried again, though she held little hope. The storm was still raging. Interference would be... Static crackled, and beneath it, incredibly, a voice. Lowway Ranch, this is Valley Emergency. Do you copy? Raina's heart leaped. She keyed the mic with shaking hands. Valley Emergency, this is Calloway. I copy. Barely. Raina? The voice resolved into someone she recognized, Tom Chen, the dispatcher. Where the hell are you? Your beacon went active 3 hours ago. Lost Creek Drainage. I've got an injured woman. Critical condition. Broken hip, possible pelvic fractures, severe dehydration. She needs immediate evac. Negative on immediate, Tom's voice crackled. Storm's Category 3 in building. Everything's grounded. We can't get birds up, and ground units can't navigate in zero visibility. Earliest possible rescue is dawn, and that's if the weather breaks. Raina checked her watch. 9:47 p.m. Dawn was 8 hours away. 8 hours of keeping Harper alive with limited supplies and no way to treat serious complications if they arose. Copy that, she said, keeping her voice level. What's the extended forecast? Storm should start breaking up around 0400. Wind dropping, visibility improving. If it holds, we can have a team to your coordinates by 0600. 6 in the morning. Still hours away, but better than days. Roger, I'll keep the beacon active. Harper Vance is stable but critical. I'll do what I can. Raina, Tom's voice was serious now. Can you keep her alive that long? It was the question she'd been avoiding asking herself. Harper was in bad shape. Shock, dehydration, possible internal bleeding. 8 hours was an eternity in her condition. Anything could go wrong. Infection could set in. The pain medication could fail. She could crash, and Raina would be powerless to stop it. But the alternative, telling Tom no, admitting defeat before the fight was even over, wasn't an option. Yes, Raina said firmly. I'll keep her alive. That's what I needed to hear. We'll be there at first light. Stay warm. Stay safe. The radio dissolved back into static, and Raina set it aside. When she looked up, Harper was watching her with eyes too bright. 8 hours, Harper said softly. 8 hours, Raina confirmed. Think you can hang on that long?
Do I have a choice? Not really, but I find that asking makes people feel more involved in the process. It startled a weak laugh out of Harper, which turned into a wince of pain. Don't make me laugh, it hurts. Sorry. Raina settled onto the floor beside her, close enough to monitor but giving her space. Tell me about your novel. The one you came up here to write. Harper's eyes drifted toward the small table where a laptop sat, closed and dark. It's about a woman who loses everything and has to rebuild from nothing. Kind of ironic, given the current situation. Art imitating life? More like life giving me material I didn't ask for. Harper shifted slightly, trying to find a position that didn't hurt, and failed. Her face went white, breath hissing through clenched teeth. Raina moved immediately, adjusting the blankets, checking that the broken hip hadn't shifted. Easy. Don't move unless you absolutely have to. Everything hurts, Harper whispered. Even breathing hurts. I know. The medication should kick in soon. Just try to stay still. They fell into silence, broken only by the howl of wind and the crackle of the wood stove. Raina used the time to assess their situation more thoroughly. The cabin was solid, well built. The stove would keep them warm as long as they had wood, and she could see a decent stack against the far wall. Food was limited but adequate. Canned soup, dried goods, enough to sustain them for a day or two if necessary. Water was the bigger concern. Harper's supply was running low, and Raina's canteen was less than half full. She could melt snow, but that required fuel and time, both of which were precious resources. The horses would need attention too. She couldn't leave them in the lean-to all night without water or food. They'd burn through their energy reserves fighting the cold, and if they went down, there'd be no way to get them back up. I need to check on the horses, Raina said, standing. I'll be back in 10 minutes. Will you be okay? Fear flashed across Harper's face, quick, instinctive, but she nodded. I've been alone for 3 days. I can handle 10 minutes. If anything changes, if you feel worse, you yell. I'll hear you. Raina bundled back into her cold weather gear, the wet layers clammy against her skin. The wind hit her like a fist the moment she opened the cabin door, driving snow into her face hard enough to sting. She bent her head and pushed forward, following the cabin wall to the lean-to. Both horses were still standing, which was a relief. They were pressed close together for warmth, their coats thick with ice and snow. Ash lifted her head as Raina approached, nickering softly. I know, girl. I know you're tired. Raina ran her hands over both horses, checking for injuries or signs of distress. Dakota was holding up well, his steady temperament showing. Ash was in worse shape, shivering despite her thick winter coat, her exhaustion bone deep. Raina dug through her saddlebags and pulled out grain, dividing it between the two horses. It wasn't much, but it would give them calories to burn for warmth. She scooped snow into her cookpot and held it against her body, using her own heat to melt it into water. It was slow, inefficient, but after 20 minutes, she had enough for both horses to drink. You did good today, she told Ash as the mare drank. Better than good. You're a hero, you know that? Ash's ears flicked, acknowledging the praise even in her exhaustion. Raina checked their shelter, tightening the tarp she'd strung across the open side to block the wind. It wasn't perfect, but it would have to do. She couldn't bring the horses inside the cabin, not enough room, and the stress of confinement might do more harm than good. By the time she finished and fought her way back to the cabin, her hands were numb again, and ice had formed in her eyelashes. She stumbled through the door and slammed it shut behind her, leaning against it as the warmth washed over her. Harper was exactly where she'd left her, but her eyes were closed. Raina's heart jumped. Harper? The eyes opened immediately. Still here. Just resting. Relief flooded through Raina. Good. That's good. Rest is what you need. She peeled off her outer layers again and hung them near the stove to dry. Her core temperature had dropped during the time outside. She could feel it in the deep shivering that racked her body. She needed to warm up, get calories in, maintain her own strength. She'd be no good to Harper if she collapsed from exhaustion or hypothermia. Raina found Harper's small camp stove and a can of soup. She heated it slowly, the smell of chicken and vegetables filling the cabin. When it was warm, she poured half into a mug for Harper and kept the rest for herself.
Think you can eat something? She asked, kneeling beside Harper again. I can try. It was a slow process, spoon-feeding Harper small amounts and waiting to make sure she could keep it down. The first few bites were tentative, Harper's stomach rebelling after days of minimal food. But gradually, she managed to eat nearly half the mug. That's enough, Harper said finally, turning her head away. Any more, and I'll be sick. Raina didn't push. She finished the rest herself, the warm food a blessing after hours of cold. She was hungrier than she'd realized, her body screaming for calories to replace what she'd burned on the brutal ride here. When she finished eating, she checked Harper's vitals again. Pulse was a bit stronger, the fluids in food helping. Color was slightly better. The pain medication was doing its job, taking the sharp edge off the agony enough that Harper could think clearly. Can I ask you something? Harper said after a long silence. Sure. Why did you come? You don't know me. You risked your life in that storm for a stranger. Raina was quiet for a moment, considering the question. Why had she come? The obvious answer, because someone needed help, felt insufficient, too simple for the complexity of the choice she'd made. I lost someone once, she said finally. My husband. He was working on the fence line during a storm, not as bad as this one. Had a heart attack. By the time I found him, she paused, the memory still sharp after 7 years. He died alone, in the cold. And I've always wondered if maybe, if I'd gotten there sooner, if I'd known something was wrong. I'm sorry, Harper whispered. The point is, Raina continued, when Ash showed up with that note, I thought about him, about dying alone. And I thought, if I can stop that from happening to someone else, how can I not try? Even if it kills you? Even then, some things are worth the risk. Harper's eyes glistened with tears. I don't know how to thank you. Stay alive, Raina said simply. That's all the thanks I need. The hours crawled past with agonizing slowness. Raina kept Harper talking when she could, monitoring her mental state, watching for signs of deterioration. They talked about everything and nothing. Harper's writing, Raina's ranch, the strange isolation of living in country where your nearest neighbor was an hour away. Don't you get lonely? Harper asked at one point, her voice drowsy from the medication. Sometimes, Raina admitted, but there's a difference between lonely and alone. I've got the horses, the cattle, the land. It's enough most days. What about the other days? Raina smiled faintly. On those days, I work harder, tire myself out so much I don't have energy left for self-pity. That sounds exhausting. It is, but it works. Around midnight, Harper's condition took a turn. Her breathing became rapid and shallow, her skin cool and clammy again despite the warmth of the cabin. Raina recognized the signs immediately, shock deepening, the body starting to shut down non-essential systems. Harper, stay with me, Raina said urgently, checking her pulse. It was fast and thready, barely palpable. Come on, don't do this. She elevated Harper's legs, trying to improve blood flow to vital organs, piled on more blankets, checked for bleeding, external or internal signs. Nothing obvious, but that didn't mean it wasn't happening inside where she couldn't see. Cold, Harper mumbled. So cold. I know. I'm warming you up, just hang on. Raina made a decision. She stripped off her own outer layer and crawled under the blankets with Harper, using her body heat to warm her. It was a last resort, skin-to-skin contact for severe hypothermia, but Harper's core temperature was dropping despite the heated cabin. What are you doing? Harper asked weakly. Keeping you alive. Now shut up and let me work. Harper's body was ice against hers, shivering violently. Raina wrapped her arms around her carefully, avoiding the injured hip, and held on. Gradually, painfully, slowly, she felt Harper's temperature begin to stabilize. The violent shivering eased to tremors. The breathing slowed to something closer to normal. Crisis averted. For now. Thank you, Harper whispered against Raina's shoulder. Don't thank me yet. We've still got hours to go. But they'd made it through the worst moment, and that counted for something. Raina stayed where she was, monitoring Harper's breathing, feeling the rise and fall of her chest. Outside, the storm continued its assault, but inside the cabin they had warmth and shelter, and each other. It would have to be enough. Around 3 in the morning, Raina felt the change. The wind's pitch shifted, the constant howl dropping to a lower register. The cabin stopped shaking with each gust. She carefully extracted herself from the blankets and went to the window, peering out into the darkness. The snow was still falling, but lighter now. The wind was dying. The storm was breaking. "Is it over?" Harper asked from the floor. "Getting there. Another hour or two and rescue should be able to move." Harper closed her eyes, relief washing over her face. "We made it." "Not yet," Raina cautioned. "Don't celebrate until you're in a hospital bed." But she allowed herself a small measure of hope. They'd made it through the night. Harper was still alive, still fighting. The storm was passing. Against impossible odds, they'd done it. Raina checked her watch. 3:47 a.m. Dawn was still hours away, but the worst was behind them. She settled back beside Harper, her own exhaustion finally catching up with her. Every muscle ached. Her eyes burned with fatigue. She couldn't remember the last time she'd been this tired. "You should sleep," Harper said quietly. "I'll wake you if anything changes." "Can't. Need to monitor you." "I'm not going anywhere, and you're dead on your feet. 5 minutes." "Just close your eyes for 5 minutes." Raina knew it was a bad idea, knew she should stay alert, but her body was betraying her, eyelids growing heavy, thoughts turning sluggish. 5 minutes, she agreed. She closed her eyes just for a moment and fell into darkness. When she woke, gray light was filtering through the cabin window and someone was pounding on the door. Raina jerked upright, disoriented, her hand reaching automatically for the rifle before her brain caught up. Not danger. Rescue. She stumbled to the door and wrenched it open. 2 paramedics in cold weather gear stood on the other side, their snowmobile idling behind them. Tom Chen was with them, his face breaking into a relieved smile when he saw her. "Damn, Calloway," he said. "You actually pulled it off." "She's inside," Raina said, stepping aside. "Broken hip, possible pelvic fractures. She's been stable for the last few hours, but she needs a hospital." The paramedics moved past her with practiced efficiency, kneeling beside Harper with their equipment. One started an IV line, while the other conducted a rapid assessment. Their voices were calm, professional, asking Harper questions about her pain level, her symptoms, how long she'd been injured. Raina watched from the doorway, suddenly feeling like an intruder in her own rescue. Her job was done. The professionals were here. Harper would be fine. She stepped outside into the cold dawn light. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world transformed, everything buried under 2 feet of fresh snow, pristine and beautiful and deadly. The sky was clearing, patches of blue visible between thinning clouds. Tom followed her out. "You okay?" "Tired, cold. But yeah, I'm okay." "That was one hell of a ride you made last night. 14 miles in a Category 3 blizzard." He shook his head. "You're either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid." "Can it be both?" He laughed. "Fair enough. Come on, we'll get you both loaded up and back to civilization. Your horses, too. We brought a trailer." "Ash goes with Harper," Raina said firmly. "That horse earned it. Already planned for it." "Whatever you say, hero." Raina wanted to protest the label, but she was too tired to argue. She helped load the horses into the trailer, both of them exhausted but unharmed. Dakota climbed in with patient resignation. Ash hesitated, looking back toward the cabin where Harper was being prepared for transport. "She's coming," Raina told the mayor. "You'll see her at the hospital, I promise." As if understanding, Ash stepped into the trailer. When they brought Harper out on the stretcher, her eyes found Raina's immediately. "Thank you," she said, her voice stronger now, with the IV fluids and proper pain medication flowing. "For everything." "Thank Ash," Raina said. "She's the one who wouldn't give up." "I'll thank you both. When I'm not half dead, I'll thank you properly." They loaded Harper into the rescue vehicle, and Raina climbed onto the second snowmobile with Tom. As they pulled away from the cabin, she looked back one last time at the small structure that had sheltered them through the night. They'd made it. Against every odd, through the worst storm in years, they'd survived. And somewhere in that frozen night, 2 strangers had become something more, bound together by the simple, profound act of refusing to let death win. The journey back to town was smooth, the storm's aftermath creating a winter wonderland that bore no resemblance to the hell they'd ridden through hours before. Raina dozed against Tom's back, too exhausted to care about protocol or dignity. When they finally reached the hospital, Harper was rushed into emergency surgery. Raina gave her statement to the doctors, provided what medical information she could, then found herself sitting in a waiting room with a cup of terrible coffee and nothing to do but wait. She must have fallen asleep again because the next thing she knew, someone was shaking her shoulder gently. "Miss Calloway?" She blinked awake. A doctor stood over her, still in surgical scrubs. "Harper?" Raina asked immediately. "She's going to be fine. The surgery went well. We've stabilized the fractures, addressed some internal bleeding. She'll need months of physical therapy, but she'll make a full recovery." Relief hit Raina so hard she had to close her eyes. "Thank you." "We should be thanking you. Another few hours and we'd have been having a very different conversation." Raina nodded, unable to speak past the sudden tightness in her throat. "She's asking for you," the doctor added. "When you're ready." Raina stood outside Harper's hospital room for a long moment before pushing the door open. She'd faced down blizzards and wolves, had ridden through conditions that would have killed most people, but somehow this felt harder. The chaos of the rescue had given her purpose, a clear mission. Now, in the fluorescent-lit quiet of the hospital corridor, she felt suddenly uncertain about what came next. Harper was propped up in bed, her right leg elevated in traction, tubes running from her arms to various monitors and IV bags. The color had returned to her face, and her eyes were clear, no longer glazed with pain and shock. She looked fragile against the white sheets, but alive. Undeniably, impossibly alive. "You look terrible," Harper said, and there was warmth in her voice that took the sting out of the words. Raina glanced down at herself, still wearing the same clothes she'd ridden in, stained with snow melt and horse sweat, her hair a tangled mess. She probably smelled worse than she looked. "You should see the other guy," Raina replied, moving to the chair beside the bed. "I heard the surgery went well. Doctor said you'll be dancing by summer." "Dancing might be optimistic, but walking works for me." Harper shifted slightly, wincing. "They told me what you did. Riding through that storm, keeping me alive all night. I don't think I really understood until now how close I came. You're tougher than you think. You survived 3 days alone with those injuries. Most people would have given up. Most people would have been smart enough not to climb on an icy roof in the middle of winter." Harper's smile was rueful. "My mother always said my independence would kill me someday. She almost got to say I told you so." "She knows you're safe?" "The hospital called her. She's driving up from Boise. Should be here this afternoon." Harper paused, her fingers plucking at the hospital blanket. "She's going to lose her mind when she sees me like this. She's going to be grateful you're alive. That's what mothers do." Harper studied Raina's face for a moment, something shifting in her expression. "The doctor said you haven't left the hospital, that you've been in that waiting room for 6 hours. Wanted to make sure you pulled through. You should go home. Get some rest. You look like you're about to fall over." Raina knew Harper was right. Her body was screaming for sleep, for a hot shower, for food that didn't come from a can. But something kept her rooted in the chair, unwilling to break the connection that had formed in that frozen cabin. "I will," she said. "Soon. Just wanted to see for myself that you were okay." "I'm okay because of you." Harper's voice went quiet, serious. "I keep trying to find the right words, and everything sounds inadequate. Thank you doesn't cover it. You saved my life. Ash saved your life. I just drove the getaway car. Don't do that. Don't minimize what you did." There was an unexpected fierceness in Harper's tone. "You made a choice that could have killed you. You rode into a storm that weather services were telling people to shelter from. You stayed with a stranger through the worst night of her life. That means something." Raina didn't know how to respond to that kind of raw gratitude. She'd spent 7 years isolated on her ranch, comfortable with solitude, unused to being needed by anyone beyond her animals. The intensity of Harper's emotion was overwhelming. "You would have done the same," she said finally. "I'd like to think so, but I don't know if I'd have the courage." Harper's hand moved across the blanket, reaching toward Raina. After a moment's hesitation, Raina took it. Harper's grip was weak but warm. "I owe you my life. That's not a debt that gets repaid easily. You don't owe me anything." "I disagree. But we can argue about it when I'm not full of painkillers and can form a coherent argument." Harper's eyes were starting to droop, the medication pulling her toward sleep. "Will you come back? To visit? If you want me to." I want you to. I think we have a lot to talk about. When my brain is working properly and you don't look like you're about to collapse. Raina squeezed Harper's hand gently. Get some rest. I'll check on Ash. Make sure she's settling in okay. The vet said they're keeping her for observation, making sure the ride didn't cause any lasting damage. Tell her I love her. Tell her she's the best horse in the entire world. I will. Raina stood to leave, but Harper's grip tightened, holding her there. Raina? Yeah? I meant what I said in the cabin, about not wanting to die alone. But it's more than that now. I'm glad it was you who came. I'm glad I got to meet you, even if the circumstances were insane. Something warm unfurled in Raina's chest, unexpected and fragile. I'm glad too, she said quietly. Now sleep. Doctor's orders. Harper's eyes closed, her breathing evening out almost immediately. Raina waited until she was certain Harper was asleep before slipping out of the room. The hospital corridors were busy with the controlled chaos of morning rounds. Nurses pushing medication carts, doctors conferring over charts. The distant beep of monitors creating a constant background rhythm. Raina navigated through it all like a ghost, invisible in her exhaustion. She found the veterinary wing in the hospital's adjacent animal care facility. Montana hospitals often had partnerships with vet clinics, understanding that in ranch country, the animals were as much family as the people. Ash was in a large stall, freshly groomed, her coat gleaming. She looked nothing like the half-frozen, desperate creature that had stumbled onto Raina's property the day before. Hey girl, Raina murmured, entering the stall. How are you feeling? Ash nickered softly and came to her, pressing her muzzle against Raina's chest. Raina wrapped her arms around the mare's neck, breathing in the familiar smell of horse and hay. You did good, she whispered. So damn good. Harper's going to be fine because of you. A young veterinarian appeared at the stall door, clipboard in hand. Miss Calloway? I'm Dr. Sarah Martinez. I've been monitoring Ash since she came in. How is she? Remarkably well, all things considered. Some muscle strain, minor dehydration, but nothing rest and good care won't fix. She's an incredibly resilient animal. Dr. Martinez consulted her notes. The story we're hearing is pretty extraordinary. 14 miles through a blizzard? Closer to 16 by the time we got to Harper's cabin. Ash led the way most of it. That's exceptional navigation skills. Horses have good homing instincts, but what she did goes beyond that. She understood the mission. Raina nodded, running her hand along Ash's neck. Harper trained her well, built a relationship based on trust. Well, Ms. Vance is lucky to have her, and lucky to have you, Dr. Martinez smiled. We'll keep Ash here for another day or two, just to be safe. After that, she can go home. Ms. Vance authorized us to release her to your care if you're willing to keep her until she's discharged. Of course, I'll take her back to my ranch. She can recover there. Perfect. I'll have the paperwork ready when you pick her up. Raina spent another few minutes with Ash, checking her over with her own practiced eye, making sure the vet hadn't missed anything. But Dr. Martinez was right. Ash was going to be fine. The mare was young, strong, and had the kind of heart that carried her through impossible situations. Harper says she loves you, Raina told the horse. Says you're the best in the world. And for what it's worth, I agree. Ash's ears flicked forward, and if horses could smile, Raina was certain this one would be. When she finally left the hospital, the sun was fully up, turning the snow-covered world into a blinding field of white. Raina had to squint against the glare as she made her way to her truck. Tom had arranged for it to be brought from the ranch. Someone had even cleared the snow off and started it, letting the engine warm. Small kindnesses in a hard land. The drive home took twice as long as usual, the road still being cleared, but Raina barely noticed. She drove on autopilot, her mind replaying the events of the last 24 hours. It felt surreal, like a story that had happened to someone else. Had she really ridden through that storm? Had she really kept Harper alive through the night? The proof was in her aching muscles, the bone-deep exhaustion that made even steering feel like work. The proof was in Harper's recovery room and Ash's stall, and the story that would spread through the valley like wildfire. By the time she pulled into her ranch, word had already reached her closest neighbors. 3 trucks were parked in her yard, and she could see people moving around, feeding her cattle, mucking out stalls, filling water troughs. The community had mobilized, taking care of what she couldn't while she'd been gone. Ed Morrison, her nearest neighbor 5 miles south, waved from the barn. He was 70 if he was a day, tough as old leather and twice as stubborn. "Heard you had yourself an adventure," he called out as Raina climbed stiffly from her truck. "Something like that. Woman's already a legend. Tom Chen's been telling everyone who'll listen about your midnight ride. Says you're crazier than a bag of cats, but braver than anyone he's ever met." "Tom talks too much." Ed laughed, a sound like gravel in a bucket. "Maybe. But he's not wrong. That was one hell of a thing you did, Raina. Your daddy would have been proud." The unexpected mention of her father hit harder than it should have. Raina felt her throat tighten. "Thanks, Ed. We got everything handled here. You go inside, get some sleep. We'll make sure your operation doesn't fall apart while you're out." "I appreciate it. That's what neighbors do. You'd do the same for any of us." "Would she?" A week ago, Raina might have helped with work, with practical things. But would she have ridden into a storm for a stranger? She honestly didn't know. Something had shifted in her yesterday, some wall she'd built after her husband's death finally cracking. Inside the house, everything was exactly as she'd left it. Her coffee mug still sat on the porch rail, now filled with snow. The rifle was propped by the door. The clock on the wall showed 11:47 a.m., 24 hours. That's all it had been. One full rotation of the clock, and her entire world felt different. Raina stripped off her filthy clothes and stepped into the shower, letting the hot water beat down on her sore muscles. The warmth was almost painful after so many hours of cold, but she stood under the spray until the water ran clear, washing away the grime and exhaustion. When she finally crawled into bed, still damp and too tired to bother with anything more than a towel, she expected to fall asleep immediately. But her mind wouldn't quiet. She kept seeing Harper's face in the lamplight, pale and frightened, kept feeling the weight of responsibility, the knowledge that one wrong decision could have meant death. She'd made the right calls. Harper was alive. Ash was safe. By any measure, it was a success. So why did she feel so unsettled? Sleep eventually claimed her, pulling her down into dreams of white storms and distant voices calling for help. When she woke, it was dark outside. She'd slept through the entire afternoon and into the evening. Her body still ached, but the edge of exhaustion had dulled. She could think clearly again, move without feeling like her legs might give out. Raina made herself eat. Scrambled eggs and toast, simple food that her stomach could handle. She checked on her animals via the barn cameras Ed had helped her install years ago. Everything was secure, well tended. Her neighbors had done good work. Then, because she couldn't help herself, she called the hospital. "Harper Vance's room, please." The phone rang twice before a woman's voice answered, older, with a slight tremor of stress underneath the polite greeting. "Hello? This is Raina Calloway. I'm calling to check on Harper. Is this her mother?" "Oh," the woman's voice warmed immediately. Yes, this is Diana Vance, and you're the woman who saved my daughter. I just happened to be in the right place." "Don't be modest. The doctors told me everything. What you did?" Diana's voice broke. "I can't even begin to thank you properly. My daughter is everything to me, and you brought her back." "How is she doing?" "Better. So much better. She's sleeping now. They've got her on a pretty heavy pain management protocol, but she was awake earlier, asking about you actually, and about her horse. Ash is doing well. The vet says she can be released in a day or two. That horse is a miracle. Harper raised her from practically nothing, and look what she did." Diana paused. "You should come by tomorrow. When Harper's more alert, she'll want to see you. I don't want to intrude on family time." "You're not intruding. You're part of this now, aren't you? Part of Harper's story. Part of all our stories." Raina didn't quite know what to say to that. She'd lived alone for so long, defined herself by her independence. The idea of being woven into someone else's narrative felt foreign. "I'll come by," she said finally. "Tomorrow afternoon." "Good. That's good. And Miss Calloway? Thank you. From a mother's heart, thank you for bringing my baby home." After the call ended, Raina sat in her quiet kitchen, listening to the house settle around her. The storm had passed, leaving everything pristine and new. The world had been wiped clean, ready for whatever came next. She thought about Harper in that hospital bed, about the fear in her eyes when she'd thought she was dying alone, about the relief when she'd realized she wasn't.
about the connection that had formed between them in that frozen cabin, two strangers bound together by survival. Raina had spent 7 years avoiding connections, convinced that isolation was safer than the risk of loss. But sitting in her empty kitchen, she realized that safety had come at a cost. She'd been surviving, but not really living. Maybe it was time to change that. The next afternoon, Raina returned to the hospital with a change of clothes for Harper, soft sweats and a warm hoodie, since hospital gowns were about as comfortable as burlap sacks. She'd also stopped by the ranch store and picked up some decent snacks, knowing hospital food was universally terrible. Harper's room was different from the day before. There were flowers now, bright spots of color against the sterile white walls. Cards lined the windowsill. The machine still beeped and hummed, but the atmosphere felt less critical, more like a recovery room than an emergency ward. Harper was awake, propped up with pillows, her dark hair brushed and pulled back. She looked more like herself, or at least more like what Raina imagined herself looked like when not half dead from exposure and trauma. Diana Vance sat in the visitor's chair, a woman in her early 60s with Harper's same dark eyes and sharp cheekbones. She stood when Raina entered, moving to embrace her before Raina could protest. "You must be Raina," Diana said, her arms surprisingly strong. "Thank you. Thank you for my daughter." "I'm glad I could help," Raina managed, awkward with the physical affection. Diana pulled back, studying Raina's face with the intensity of a mother cataloging every detail of the person who'd saved her child. Whatever she saw seemed to satisfy her because she smiled. "I'm going to get some coffee," she said. "Give you two a chance to talk. Harper hasn't stopped asking about you since she woke up properly." "Mom," Harper protested, but Diana was already gathering her purse and heading for the door. "Take your time," she called back. "I'll be in the cafeteria." The door closed, leaving Raina and Harper alone. The silence stretched for a moment before they both spoke at once. "How are you? Did you bring—" They stopped, laughed. The tension broke. "You first," Harper said. "I brought you clothes. Figured you'd want something more comfortable than hospital chic." Raina held up the bag. "And snacks. The good kind. Not the stuff they sell in the vending machines." "You're a saint. They tried to feed me something they claimed was turkey yesterday. I'm pretty sure it was a crime against poultry." Raina set the bag on the bedside table and took the chair Diana had vacated. Harper looked better, color in her cheeks, clarity in her eyes, but there were shadows there too. The kind that came from facing your own mortality. "How's the pain?" Raina asked. "Manageable. They've got me on enough medication to knock out a horse, which is probably the only reason I can have a conversation." Harper shifted slightly, testing her range of motion. "Doctor says I'll be here another week at least. Then physical therapy for months, but I'll walk again. Maybe even run someday." "That's good. That's really good. It's more than I had 3 days ago." Harper's expression grew serious. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened, about how close I came. So it's natural to process trauma. The hospital probably has counselors. I don't need a counselor. I need to understand why you did what you did." Harper leaned forward slightly, intense despite her weakened state. "I keep running through it in my mind. You didn't know me. You had no obligation. Every rational part of your brain must have been screaming at you to stay safe, call for help, let the professionals handle it. I did call for help. They couldn't come until the storm passed. So you came instead, alone, through conditions that killed people every year." Harper's voice dropped. "Why?" Raina thought about deflecting, about giving the easy answer, but Harper deserved better than that. She deserved the truth. "I told you about my husband, about how he died alone." Raina's hands twisted together in her lap. "What I didn't tell you was that I blamed myself. For years, I replayed that day over and over, wondering if I could have prevented it, if I could have gotten to him sooner. The guilt ate at me until I couldn't stand to be around people anymore. I isolated myself on the ranch because it felt safer than risking that kind of loss again." Harper listened without interrupting, her eyes never leaving Raina's face. "When Ash showed up with your note, I saw a chance to do something I couldn't do for James, to save someone instead of losing them. It was selfish, in a way. I wasn't just saving you, I was trying to save myself from 7 years of regret." "That's not selfish," Harper said quietly. "That's human." "Maybe,
Or maybe I'm just tired of being alone. The admission surprised Raina even as she said it. Either way, I made the choice. And I'd make it again. Harper reached out and Raina took her hand. The gesture was becoming familiar, a touchstone between them. I'm glad you're selfish then, Harper said. I'm glad your guilt drove you out into that storm. Because I'm alive, and I get to write my book and see my mother, and maybe, if I'm very lucky, get to know the woman who saved me. You already know me. You saw me at my worst in that cabin. I saw you at your best, calm under pressure, competent, kind, even when you were terrified. I wasn't terrified. Liar. I could see it in your eyes. You were scared out of your mind, but you did it anyway. That's the definition of courage. Raina didn't feel courageous. She felt exhausted and confused and strangely vulnerable sitting in this hospital room with a woman she barely knew but felt connected to in ways she couldn't explain. What happens now? She asked. Now I recover. You go back to your ranch. We figure out what this is. Harper gestured between them. This connection. This thing that happened in the storm. Maybe it was just survival. Maybe it'll fade when we're back to normal life. But do you believe that? Raina thought about it honestly. Did she believe this was temporary, that once Harper recovered and went back to her writing, once the adrenaline faded and life returned to routine, they'd drift apart like ships that had passed in the night? No, she admitted. I don't believe that. Good, because I don't either. Harper squeezed her hand. I think maybe we saved each other out there, in different ways. They talked for another hour about everything and nothing. Harper told her about her novel, the story of loss and rebuilding that felt painfully relevant now. Raina talked about the ranch, about the rhythm of seasons, and the satisfaction of hard work. They discovered shared interests, a love of old Western films, a preference for coffee so strong it could strip paint, a mutual appreciation for silence. When Diana returned, she found them laughing over Harper's description of her first attempt at horseback riding, which had ended with her face first in a mud puddle and Ash looking distinctly unimpressed. I'm glad to see you smiling, Diana said to her daughter. You had me so worried. I'm okay, Mom. Really? Harper looked at Raina. We both are. Raina stayed through the afternoon, leaving only when the nurses came for Harper's physical therapy session. She promised to return the next day, and the day after that, as many days as it took. Walking out of the hospital, Raina felt lighter than she had in years. The isolation she'd wrapped around herself like armor was cracking, letting in light. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ed Morrison. Ash cleared for release. Want me to pick her up? Raina smiled and typed back, I'll get her, thanks for everything. She drove to the veterinary clinic, where Dr. Martinez had Ash ready to go. The mare nickered when she saw Raina, pressing her face into Raina's hands. Someone's happy to see you, Dr. Martinez observed. The feeling's mutual. Raina checked Ash over one more time. She really is remarkable. She is, and so are you, from what I hear. The whole valley's talking about your rescue. People exaggerate. Do they? Because the weather reports I saw said that storm dropped 30 inches of snow and had wind gusts up to 70 miles per hour. That's not exaggeration. That's a death sentence for anyone caught in it. Raina helped load Ash into her trailer, the mare walking up the ramp without hesitation. Trust. That's what it all came down to. Ash trusted her, just as she'd trusted Ash to lead them through the storm. Back at the ranch, Raina settled Ash into the barn next to Dakota. The two horses greeted each other like old friends, and Raina made sure they both had plenty of hay and fresh water. You're staying here until Harper can take you home, she told Ash, which means you're stuck with me for a while. Think you can handle that? Ash's response was to immediately start eating, which Raina took as acceptance. Over the following days, a routine developed. Mornings were spent on ranch work, feeding animals, checking fences, the endless tasks that defined rural life. Afternoons were reserved for the hospital, sitting with Harper as she progressed through physical therapy, bringing her books and decent food and conversation. They talked about Harper's recovery, about Raina's life on the ranch. They talked about the storm and what it had meant, about fear and courage, and the strange ways people came into each other's lives. Diana left after a week, reassured that her daughter was truly going to be okay. Before she left, she pulled Raina aside, Take care of her, Diana said. Not just now, but after. She needs someone like you in her life, someone solid. I'm not. Yes, you are. Don't argue with a mother who knows her daughter. Diana smiled. Harper talks about you constantly, about your strength, your calm. She lights up when you walk into the room. I haven't seen her this engaged with life in years. The painkillers might have something to do with that. Don't sell yourself short. You matter to her, and I think she matters to you too. Raina couldn't deny it. Harper had become the brightest part of her day, the reason she found herself smiling while doing mundane tasks. It was unexpected and complicated and absolutely terrifying. But for the first time in 7 years, Raina found herself willing to take that risk. 2 weeks after the rescue, Harper was finally cleared for discharge. Not home, not yet, but to a rehabilitation facility where she could continue her recovery with professional support. Raina helped her pack her things, gathering the flowers and cards and small mementos that had accumulated. I can't believe I'm finally getting out of here, Harper said, watching Raina fold clothes. I love the nurses, but if I have to eat one more cup of institutional pudding, I might lose my mind. The rehab place is supposed to have better food. Anywhere has better food. Prison cafeterias probably have better food. Raina laughed, carefully placing Harper's laptop in its case. Your novel's on here? What I've got so far, though I'm thinking of scrapping everything and starting over. Why? Because I was writing about loss and rebuilding from a theoretical perspective. Now I actually know what it feels like. Harper's expression turned thoughtful. Everything's different when you've really faced it. The fear, the darkness, but also the hope. The people who show up when you need them most. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. You should keep writing, Raina said. The world needs true stories, even when they're wrapped in fiction. Will you read it when it's done? I'd be honored. The orderly arrived with a wheelchair, and they began the process of getting Harper ready to move. It was slow, painful work, but Harper's determination showed in every careful movement. She was healing, getting stronger every day. As they wheeled Harper out of the hospital, Raina, walking alongside, the afternoon sun hit them with surprising warmth. Spring was coming, slowly but surely, melting the last of the storm's snow. Raina? Harper said as they approached the transport van. Yeah? Come visit me at the rehab place, please. I know it's a lot to ask, but I'll be there. You're not getting rid of me that easily. Harper's smile was radiant, transforming her face. Good, because I have plans for when I can walk again. Plans that involve you and Ash and maybe a trail ride that doesn't end with me broken on rocks. That sounds like a terrible idea. All the best ideas are terrible at first. They loaded Harper into the van, Raina making sure she was comfortable before stepping back. Through the window, Harper waved and Raina waved back, feeling the strange pull of connection that made even temporary separation feel difficult. As the van pulled away, Raina stood in the hospital parking lot, the sun warm on her face, and felt something shift inside her chest. The walls she'd built were crumbling, and instead of fear, she felt possibility. The storm had changed everything. It had brought Harper into her life, had forced her to face her isolation, had reminded her that some risks were worth taking. And this, whatever this was growing between her and Harper, felt like the biggest risk of all. But Raina Calloway had ridden through a blizzard to save a stranger. She'd faced down death and won. Whatever came next, she could face that too. The rehabilitation facility was nothing like the hospital. All warm woods and soft lighting designed to feel less clinical, more human. Raina visited 3 times a week, driving the 45 minutes each way without complaint. She told herself it was just checking on Harper's progress, making sure the woman who'd nearly died was actually recovering. But the truth sat heavier in her chest, growing with each visit. She was falling for Harper Vance, and the realization terrified her more than any blizzard ever could. March melted into April, and Harper's progress was remarkable. The first time Raina saw her stand with the parallel bars, sweat streaming down her face as she forced her damaged hip to bear weight, something fierce and proud bloomed in Raina's chest. Harper didn't quit. Every setback, and there were many, only seemed to strengthen her resolve. "You're staring," Harper said during one session, gripping the bars with white-knuckled determination as she took another agonizing step. "Just impressed," Raina replied from her seat against the wall. "You've come a long way." From completely helpless to mostly helpless, real progress. But Harper was smiling, the kind of smile that acknowledged pain without being defeated by it. Her physical therapist, a woman named Maria with arms like a wrestler and the patience of a saint, guided Harper through the movement. That's it. Good. One more. You've got this. Harper took the step, her face contorting with effort, and Raina found herself holding her breath until Harper made it. Such a small thing, one step, maybe 18 inches, but it represented everything. Independence, healing, hope. After the session, Raina helped Harper back to her room. It had become their routine. Therapy, then lunch together, then quiet conversation while Harper rested. The facility encouraged visitors, understanding that recovery was as much mental as physical. Ash threw a shoe yesterday, Raina said, settling into the chair beside Harper's bed. Ed's farrier came out to fix it. She tried to convince him she didn't need all 4 feet shod, just the 3 that weren't inconveniencing her. Harper laughed, the sound still tinged with exhaustion from therapy. That sounds like her. She's always been opinionated about hoof care. What did the farrier say? That she was a beautiful mare with terrible manners. Then he gave her an apple and she decided he was acceptable after all. Bribery works on Ash every time. She has no principles when it comes to treats. Harper shifted in bed, finding a more comfortable position. I miss her. I know she's in good hands, but I miss seeing her every day. She misses you too. Keeps looking toward the road like she's waiting for you to show up. Maybe I should call her. Would that be crazy? I've had full conversations with my cattle. You're fine. Raina pulled out her phone and video called Ed, who was still at the ranch helping with the daily work. He answered on the 3rd ring, his weathered face filling the screen. You need something, or is this a social call? Can you take the phone to Ash's stall? Harper wants to say hello. Ed's expression softened. The old cowboy had a weakness for both horses and romance, though he'd deny the latter. Give me a minute. The screen bounced as he walked, showing glimpses of the barn Raina knew by heart. Then Ash's face appeared, curious and alert at the unusual device being pointed at her. Hey, beautiful girl, Harper said, her voice catching. Hey, my sweet Ash, I'm okay, I'm getting better. Raina's taking such good care of you. The mare's ears pricked forward at Harper's voice, and she whinnied, clear and strong, through the phone's speaker. Harper's eyes filled with tears. I know, baby. I miss you too. Just a little longer, okay? Then we'll go home together. They talked to the horse for another minute before Ed took the phone back, promising to give Ash extra carrots on Harper's behalf. When the call ended, Harper was crying openly, not bothering to hide it. Sorry, she said, wiping her eyes. I don't know why I'm such a mess. You almost died. You're in constant pain, and you're separated from the horse that saved your life. I'd say you're entitled to a few tears. Raina moved to sit on the edge of the bed, carefully avoiding Harper's injured leg. Want to talk about it? I just feel so useless, like my whole life is on hold while I learn to walk again. My novel's stalled because I can't focus. My cabin's sitting empty. Everything I worked for feels so far away. Recovery isn't a pause button, Harper. It's still living. It's just harder than the living you're used to. Harper looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. How do you always know the right thing to say? I don't. I just say what I'm thinking and hope it doesn't make things worse. Well, you're batting 1,000 so far. Harper reached for Raina's hand, their fingers intertwining with familiar ease. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why do you keep coming here? 3 times a week, 90-minute round trip. You've got a ranch to run, a life to live. You don't owe me anything? Raina had known this question would come eventually. She'd been preparing an answer, something casual and deflecting. But sitting there with Harper's hand warm in hers, the late afternoon sun slanting through the window, she found she couldn't lie. Because I want to be here, she said simply. Because seeing you get stronger makes me feel like I'm getting stronger too. Because when I'm not here, I'm thinking about being here. She paused, gathering courage. Because you matter to me, Harper, more than I expected, more than I probably should admit. The silence that followed felt enormous, filled with possibility and fear in equal measure. Harper's grip on her hand tightened. I was hoping you'd say that, Harper said quietly, because you matter to me too. You're the best part of my day, every day.
When I'm struggling through therapy, I think about you sitting there watching, and it makes me want to try harder.
When I'm frustrated and ready to quit, I remember that you rode through a blizzard for me, and I think maybe I can take one more step. Harper, let me finish, please. Harper took a breath. I know this is complicated. I know we met under impossible circumstances, and maybe this is just trauma bonding, or survivor's guilt, or whatever the therapist would call it. But I don't think it is. I think maybe the storm brought us together for a reason. Raina wanted to kiss her. The urge was sudden and overwhelming, but Harper was injured and vulnerable, and this wasn't the right time. Instead, she lifted Harper's hand and pressed it against her own chest, over her heart. Feel that? Raina asked. Your heartbeat? It's racing. Has been every time I see you for the last month. I tried to tell myself it was just adrenaline, just leftover stress from the rescue. But it's not. It's you. Harper's eyes were bright with tears again, but these were different. Happy tears. Hope tears. So what do we do about this? Harper asked. I don't know. I haven't let myself feel anything for anyone since James died. I'm probably terrible at it. Well, I haven't dated anyone seriously in 3 years because I was too focused on my writing, so we're both out of practice. Harper smiled through her tears. Maybe we can figure it out together. I'd like that. They sat together in comfortable silence, hands clasped, something new and fragile forming between them. Outside the window, the Montana sky was doing that thing it did in spring, transforming from blue to gold to pink in the span of minutes, painting the world in colors too beautiful to be real. A knock at the door broke the moment. Maria appeared, clipboard in hand. Sorry to interrupt, but Dr. Patterson wants to see you, Harper. He's got your latest scans. Harper's face went tight with anxiety. The scans would show how her bones were healing, whether the surgery had been successful, if she'd walk normally again, or spend the rest of her life with a limp. Want me to come with you? Raina asked. Would you? Of course. They made their way to Dr. Patterson's office, Harper using her walker with increasing confidence. The doctor was a tall man in his 50s with kind eyes and the sort of calm competence that made people trust him instinctively. Harper, Ms. Calloway. He gestured to chairs. Thank you for coming. I wanted to go over your progress. He pulled up images on his computer, X-rays that looked like abstract art to Raina, but clearly meant something to him. Harper leaned forward, trying to read her future in the ghostly pictures of her own bones. The good news is the fracture is healing beautifully, Dr. Patterson said. The hardware is exactly where it should be, no signs of infection or rejection. The bone density is improving. You're doing everything right. And the bad news? Harper asked, her voice tight. There's no bad news exactly, but I need to adjust your expectations about timeline. Full recovery, and by that I mean returning to all normal activities without restriction, is going to take longer than we initially hoped. We're looking at 8 months minimum, possibly a year. Harper's face fell. A year? The hip is a complex joint, and you did significant damage. But Harper, look at me. He waited until she met his eyes. You're going to walk again. You're going to ride again. You're going to do everything you did before. It's just going to take time and patience. Patience has never been my strong suit. Then it's a good thing you've got support. Dr. Patterson glanced at Raina with a knowing smile. The patients who do best in recovery are the ones who aren't doing it alone. After the appointment, they returned to Harper's room in subdued silence. Raina could see Harper processing the information, trying to reconcile hope with extended reality. A year, Harper said finally, staring out the window. My cabin lease runs out in 6 months. I can't afford to renew it and pay for rehab. I'll have to give it up, move back to Boise with my mother. Or you could come stay at my ranch. The words were out before Raina could think them through, impulsive and terrifying. Harper turned to stare at her. What? I've got space. Guest room's been empty for years. You could continue your recovery there, work on your novel, be close to Ash. It makes sense. Raina's heart was pounding. If you want to, I mean. No pressure. Raina, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. And before you argue, think about it practically. You need somewhere to recover. Boise means leaving Ash, leaving your mountains, living with your mother who'll smother you with worry. My place means independence, peace, and a woman who'll make you work for your keep by listening to ranch gossip and taste testing my attempts at cooking. Harper laughed despite herself. You make a compelling argument. I have my moments. Can I think about it? It's a big decision. Take all the time you need. The offer stands. But Raina could see the wheels turning in Harper's mind, could see the possibility taking root. And despite the terror of having someone in her space after 7 years of solitude, she found herself hoping Harper would say yes. 2 days later, Harper called with her answer. Raina was in the barn, mucking out stalls, when her phone rang. She almost didn't answer. Her hands were filthy, and she was sweating despite the cool morning, but Harper's name on the screen made her fumble for the phone.
"Hey," Raina said, slightly breathless. "Hey yourself. Are you doing manual labor? You sound like you're dying."
Just shoveling horse shit, the glamorous life of a rancher. Harper laughed, and Raina could hear the smile in her voice. I've been thinking about your offer. And I want to say yes, if you're really sure. I don't want to impose, and I know it's a lot having someone in your space. Harper, yes or no? A pause, then, yes. I want to come stay with you. Raina's chest filled with something warm and bright. Good. That's good. When are they releasing you from the facility? 2 weeks. Dr. Patterson says I'm progressing well enough to continue therapy as an outpatient. I'll need to come in twice a week for sessions, but otherwise I can recover at home. Or, well, at your home. Our home, Raina corrected, then felt her face heat. I mean, while you're there, it'll be our space. I like the sound of that. They talked for another 20 minutes, working out logistics. Raina would need to set up the guest room properly, make sure it was accessible. She'd need to install a ramp for the porch steps, maybe grab bars in the bathroom. Harper would bring her laptop, clothes, and the determination to finish her novel. When they finally hung up, Raina stood in the barn with a shovel in her hands and a stupid grin on her face. Dakota watched her from his stall with what could only be described as equine judgment. Don't look at me like that, she told the horse. I know what I'm doing. Dakota snorted, clearly disagreeing. The 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Raina threw herself into making the house ready, attacking the guest room with a level of focus that bordered on obsessive. She painted the walls a soft sage green that reminded her of Harper's eyes. She bought new bedding, soft and comfortable. She installed the ramp, the grab bars, made sure every detail was perfect. Ed caught her rearranging the furniture for the 3rd time and shook his head. You know she's recovering from an injury, right? Not coming for a home inspection. I want her to be comfortable. She could sleep on a pile of hay and be comfortable, given that she almost died in a frozen cabin. You're doing all this because you're nervous. I'm not nervous. Raina, you've rearranged that nightstand 4 times in the last hour. You're terrified. He wasn't wrong. The reality of Harper moving in was hitting her in waves. What if they couldn't stand living together? What if proximity killed whatever was growing between them? What if Raina's years of isolation had made her impossible to live with? What if this is a huge mistake? She asked Ed quietly. The old rancher was silent for a long moment, his weathered face thoughtful. Then he put a hand on her shoulder. James wouldn't want you to spend the rest of your life alone, he said gently. He'd want you to be happy, and I haven't seen you this happy in 7 years. I barely know her. You knew her well enough to risk your life for her. You know her well enough to visit 3 times a week. You know her well enough to invite her into your home. Ed squeezed her shoulder. Sometimes knowing is instant. Sometimes it takes years. There's no rule book for this, Raina. You just have to trust your gut. My gut is screaming at me to run away. Your gut is a coward. Listen to your heart instead. The day Harper was discharged, Raina arrived early, truck cleaned and ready. She found Harper in her room, dressed in real clothes for the first time in weeks, jeans and a soft flannel shirt, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. She looked beautiful and nervous and excited all at once. Ready to get out of here? Raina asked from the doorway. So ready. If I never see another hospital gown or cup of pudding, it'll be too soon. They loaded Harper's belongings, surprisingly few for someone who'd been there over a month, and went through the discharge paperwork. Maria hugged them both goodbye, making Harper promise to keep up with her exercises. And don't let her slack off, Maria told Raina. She'll try to push too hard and then get frustrated when it hurts. You need to be the voice of reason. I can be reasonable, Raina said. Good luck with that, Harper muttered, earning a laugh from both women. The drive to the ranch felt significant, like they were crossing some invisible threshold. Harper watched the landscape change from town to open country, her expression wistful. "I've missed this," she said. "The space, the sky. You can't see stars from the city. Wait until you see them from my porch. On a clear night, it's like someone spilled diamonds across black velvet. That's surprisingly poetic for someone who shovels horse shit for a living." "I contain multitudes." They pulled into the ranch just as the sun was beginning its descent toward the mountains. Harper insisted on walking from the truck to the house, using her cane but refusing help. Raina hovered nearby, ready to catch her if she stumbled, but Harper made it to the porch under her own power. "I did it," Harper said, slightly breathless but triumphant. "Never doubted you for a second." Inside, Harper stopped in the doorway, taking in the warm kitchen, the living room with its stone fireplace, the hallway leading to the bedrooms. It was simple, comfortable, lived in. Nothing fancy, but it was home. "It's perfect," Harper said softly. "Wait until you see your room." Raina led her down the hall, nerves fluttering in her stomach. She'd second-guessed every choice 100 times. What if Harper hated the color? What if... Harper's gasp cut off her spiraling thoughts. "Raina, this is..." Harper moved into the room slowly, taking in the soft green walls, the comfortable bed, the writing desk positioned perfectly by the window with a view of the mountains. "You did all this for me? I wanted you to have a good space to work, to heal." Raina rubbed the back of her neck, suddenly self-conscious. "If you don't like the color, I can repaint." Harper turned and kissed her. It was soft, tentative, their first kiss tasting of possibility and promise. When they pulled apart, both were breathing harder. "The color is perfect," Harper whispered. "Everything is perfect." That night, they sat on the porch as the stars came out, exactly as Raina had promised. Harper was right about the diamonds on velvet. The Milky Way stretched overhead in a river of light, so bright it cast shadows. "I could get used to this," Harper said, her hand finding Raina's between their chairs. "Good, because you're stuck here for a while." "There's nowhere else I'd rather be." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead, and Raina felt something settle in her chest. Peace, hope, the sense that maybe, finally, she was home too. The storm had taken so much from both of them, but it had also given them this, each other, a second chance, the courage to try again. And as the Montana night wrapped around them, cold and beautiful and infinite, Raina realized that some risks were worth taking after all. The first week of living together was an exercise in awkward adjustment and unexpected grace. Raina woke at 5 every morning, her internal clock calibrated to ranching hours, and tried to move quietly through the house so Harper could sleep. Harper, it turned out, was also an early riser, her writer's brain most active in the pre-dawn hours, and they'd meet in the kitchen like two ghosts discovering they haunted the same house. "I made coffee," became Raina's morning greeting. "You're a lifesaver," became Harper's reply. They'd sit at the kitchen table in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the mountains gold through the window. These quiet moments felt sacred somehow, like they were learning each other's rhythms without words. But there were complications too. Harper pushed herself too hard on the third day, attempting stairs she wasn't ready for, and collapsed halfway up. Raina heard the cry of pain and found her gripping the railing, tears streaming down her face. "I've got you," Raina said, supporting Harper's weight as they made it back down. "What were you thinking?" "I was thinking I'm tired of being helpless," Harper snapped, frustration and humiliation making her voice sharp. "I was thinking I should be able to climb my own damn stairs." "You will. In time, but not today." "I hate this. I hate being weak." Raina helped Harper to the couch and sat beside her. "You're not weak. You're healing. There's a difference. It doesn't feel different. It just feels like failure." "Harper, look at me." Raina waited until Harper met her eyes. "You survived 3 days alone with a broken hip. You sent your horse through a blizzard to find help. You've been in physical therapy for weeks, working harder than anyone I've ever seen. You're the furthest thing from weak I know." Harper's anger crumbled into exhausted tears. Raina held her while she cried, stroking her hair, whispering reassurances. When the storm passed, Harper pulled back, wiping her eyes. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't take it out on you. You can take it out on me. I can handle it. Raina tucked a strand of hair behind Harper's ear. But you need to be honest with me about your limits. I can't help if you don't tell me when you're struggling. I don't want to be a burden. You're not. You couldn't be. But we're in this together now, which means communication. Deal? Harper nodded, managing a watery smile. Deal. The incident marked a turning point. Harper stopped trying to hide her pain, stopped pretending recovery was linear. And Raina stopped hovering quite so much, learning to trust that Harper would ask for help when she needed it. They developed routines. Mornings were for ranch work and writing. Raina would handle the animals while Harper worked on her novel at the desk by the window. Afternoons were for physical therapy exercises, which Raina supervised with the same calm patience she showed training horses. Evenings were theirs together, cooking dinner, sitting on the porch, talking about everything and nothing. Tell me about James, Harper said one night, 3 weeks into her stay. They were on the porch, wrapped in blankets against the cool May evening. You mentioned him, but you've never really talked about him. Raina was quiet for a long moment, watching the stars emerge. She'd avoided this conversation, afraid that talking about her late husband would somehow diminish what was growing with Harper. But Harper deserved to know the full story. We met young, Raina began. I was 20, he was 22. He worked for my father, learning the ranch business. We fell hard and fast, got married within a year. Everyone said we were too young, that it wouldn't last. She smiled at the memory. We were determined to prove them wrong. Did you? We had 15 good years, not perfect. We fought like cats sometimes, but good. He was my partner in every sense. We built this place together, dreamed together. Raina's voice caught. And then one winter morning, he went out to check the fence line. Had a heart attack in the north pasture. Congenital defect nobody knew about. By the time I found him, he'd been gone for hours. Harper's hand found hers in the darkness, squeezing gently. I blamed myself for a long time, Raina continued. Thought I should have known something was wrong. Should have gone with him. Should have saved him somehow. The guilt ate at me until I couldn't stand to be around people anymore. So I didn't. I just worked and existed and convinced myself that was enough. Until a desperate mare showed up with a message. Until you, Raina corrected softly. The mare brought me to you, but you're the one who reminded me what it felt like to care about someone again. To want to save someone. Not just go through the motions of living. Do you think he'd approve of this, of us? Raina considered the question seriously. James had been a good man, generous and kind. He'd loved her fiercely and would have wanted her happiness above all else. I think he'd tell me I was an idiot for waiting 7 years, Raina said. And then he'd probably like you more than he liked me, because that's how he was. He had a thing for smart, stubborn women. Harper laughed, the sound carrying across the quiet ranch. I wish I could have met him. He would have loved Ash. He always said you could tell everything about a person by the way they treated their animals. What does Ash say about me? That you're patient, kind, and willing to go the distance for those you love. All the important things. They sat together in the gathering dark, the past and present coexisting peacefully for the first time since the storm. Raina felt lighter somehow, like talking about James had released something she'd been holding too tightly. Thank you for telling me, Harper said eventually, for trusting me with that. Thank you for asking, for caring enough to want to know. The weeks turned into months, and Harper's progress was steady, if not spectacular. She graduated from the walker to a cane, then to walking short distances unassisted. The limp would probably never fully disappear, but it was getting less pronounced. More importantly, the pain was manageable, allowing her to focus on rebuilding strength. Her novel was coming together too. Raina would hear the rapid-fire clicking of keys from the guest room, punctuated by long silences when Harper was thinking. Sometimes Harper would emerge frustrated, having written herself into a corner. Other times, she'd be radiant with the joy of a scene that worked perfectly. Want to hear what I wrote today? Harper asked one evening in late June. They were in the kitchen, Raina making dinner while Harper sat at the table, her laptop open. It had become another ritual. Harper would read passages aloud, and Raina would listen while cooking, offering feedback from a reader's perspective rather than a writer's. Always, Raina said, stirring the pot of chili on the stove. Harper's voice filled the kitchen, rich and expressive as she read about her protagonist learning to trust again after loss. The parallels to their own story weren't subtle, but they were beautiful, transformed by Harper's talent into something universal and deeply moving. When she finished, Raina was quiet for a moment, processing. "That's the chapter where she decides to take the risk," Raina said finally, "to let someone in again. Does it work? Is it believable? It's perfect. Because you're not writing theory anymore. You're writing truth." Harper closed the laptop, her eyes bright. "You're in this book, not literally, but your spirit is, your courage, the way you showed up when it mattered most." "I just did what anyone would do." "No, you did what you would do, which is extraordinary." Harper stood, moving around the table to where Raina was cooking. "You don't see yourself clearly. You think you're just some isolated rancher who got lucky. But you're so much more than that." "What am I then?" Raina asked, turning to face her. "You're the person who rides into storms, who keeps promises, who loves deeply even when it terrifies you." Harper cupped Raina's face in her hands. "You're home." They kissed, slow and deep, the kind of kiss that said everything words couldn't. When they broke apart, Raina was breathless. "The chili's burning," Harper whispered against her lips. "I don't care." But she turned off the stove anyway, and they moved to the living room, leaving dinner forgotten. They'd learned each other slowly over the months, tentative touches becoming confident, stolen kisses becoming something more deliberate. There was no rush, no pressure, just two people finding their way to each other, one careful step at a time. That night marked another shift. They fell asleep together on the couch, wrapped around each other, and when Raina woke in the small hours, Harper's head on her shoulder, she felt completely at peace for the first time since James died. July brought Harper's mother for a visit. Diana arrived in a whirlwind of energy and concern, immediately fussing over her daughter. "You look thin. Are you eating enough? Raina, is she eating enough?" "She eats like a horse, Diana. I promise." "And your hip? How's the pain? Are you keeping up with therapy?" "Mom, breathe. I'm fine. Better than fine." Diana finally stopped moving long enough to really look at Harper, at the color in her cheeks, the strength in her stance, the happiness radiating from her. Her eyes softened. "You are better than fine," she said quietly. "You look happy." "I am happy." Diana's gaze shifted to Raina, assessing. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her because she smiled. "Good. That's good." She turned back to Harper. "Now show me around this place. I want to see where my daughter's been living." The tour included the barn, where Ash greeted Diana with enthusiastic affection. The mare had fully recovered from her ordeal, sleek and healthy, and clearly delighted to see Harper's mother. "This is the horse that saved your life," Diana said, stroking Ash's neck with reverence. "Her and Raina both," Harper corrected. "Team effort." They showed Diana the ranch, the pastures where cattle grazed, the equipment barn, the endless Montana sky that stretched to the horizon. Raina watched Diana take it all in, seeing the moment when understanding clicked. "You're going to stay here, aren't you?" Diana asked Harper later, when they had a moment alone. "You're not coming back to Boise." Harper glanced at Raina, who was showing Ed something on the tractor, their conversation animated. "I don't know yet. We haven't talked about it. But you want to." "I want to be wherever she is," Harper admitted. "Is that crazy? We've known each other for 4 months. Your father proposed after 6 weeks. We had 43 years together before he passed. Time isn't the measure of connection. Depth is." Diana took her daughter's hand. "Do you love her?" Harper didn't hesitate. "Yes." "Does she love you?" "I think so. We haven't said it yet." "Why not?" "Because I'm scared. Because saying it makes it real, and real things can end. Real things can hurt." Diana's expression was understanding but firm. Real things can also heal, can build, can become the foundation of a life worth living. She squeezed Harper's hand. "Don't let fear keep you from joy. You've already lost too much time to that broken hip. Don't lose more to a broken heart that's afraid to hope." That night, after Diana had gone to bed in the guest room, Harper had moved into Raina's room weeks ago, though neither had acknowledged it explicitly. The two women sat on the porch, their familiar spot under the stars. "Your mom's great," Raina said. "She likes you. I can tell because she wasn't overtly terrifying. That was her not being terrifying? Harper laughed. That was her on her best behavior. Trust me. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, then Harper took a breath. My lease on the cabin is officially up next week, she said. I need to make a decision about what happens next. Raina's heart rate picked up. They'd been dancing around this conversation for weeks. What do you want to happen? I want to stay here, with you. If you want that too. I want that, Raina said without hesitation. I've wanted that for a while now. Really? Harper, you already live here. Your clothes are in my closet. Your toothbrush is in my bathroom. Ash is in my barn. The only thing missing is making it official. I don't want to assume, then let me be clear. I love you. I'm in love with you. I want you to stay, not as a guest, but as my partner. I want to build a life with you here. The words came easier than Raina expected, like they'd been waiting to be spoken. I know it's fast, I know we're probably crazy, but I've never been more sure of anything. Harper's eyes filled with tears. I love you too, so much it scares me sometimes. Good scared or bad scared? Good scared? The kind that means something matters enough to be frightening. They kissed under the stars, and it felt like a promise, like a beginning. The next morning, they drove to Harper's cabin together to pack up her remaining belongings. The small structure looked different in the summer light, less forbidding than it had been that terrible night in March. Harper stood in the doorway for a long moment, remembering. This is where I thought I was going to die, she said quietly. But you didn't. You fought. You survived. Because of you. Because of both of us. Because Ash refused to give up. Because sometimes the universe puts the right people in the right place at the right time. They packed Harper's books, her research materials, the personal items that had made the cabin home. It didn't take long. Harper traveled light, always had. As they loaded the last box into the truck, Harper took one final look at the cabin. Thank you, she said softly. For what? For being a place where I could write, where I could hide when I needed to, and for almost killing me, which led me to the best thing that's ever happened to me. You're welcome, Raina said uncertainly, making Harper laugh. August brought harvest season, and Harper learned the rhythm of ranch work. She couldn't do the heavy lifting, her hip wasn't there yet, but she could drive the truck, could help sort and organize, could bring water and food to the workers. She threw herself into it with characteristic determination, earning respect from Ed and the other ranchers who helped with the big jobs. Your girl's tougher than she looks, Ed told Raina one evening, watching Harper argue with a stubborn gate latch. She rode 3 days alone with a broken hip. Tough doesn't begin to cover it. You two are good together, balance each other out. You think so? I know so. You've got the steady calm, she's got the fire. You ground her, she lifts you up. That's how the best partnerships work. Raina watched Harper finally wrestle the gate open, her triumphant grin visible even from a distance. I never thought I'd have this again. After James, I was so sure that chapter was closed. Life's full of chapters. Some end too soon, some go on longer than expected. But they're all part of the story. Ed clapped her on the shoulder. This is a good chapter, Raina. Enjoy it. September brought Harper's first real test, a trail ride with Raina and Ash up to the high meadows. It was ambitious, maybe too ambitious, but Harper was determined to prove she could do it. We take it slow, Raina insisted, checking Ash's saddle for the third time. Any pain, any sign you're overdoing it? We turn back. No arguments. No arguments, Harper agreed, though her excitement was palpable. They rode out in the early morning, the air crisp with the promise of fall. Ash practically danced beneath Harper, overjoyed to be doing real work again. Dakota plodded beside them, steady and reliable as always. The climb was steep in places, testing Harper's strength and balance. Raina watched her carefully, ready to call it off at the first sign of trouble. But Harper handled it beautifully, moving with Ash like they'd never been apart, reading the horse's signals and responding with practiced ease. When they reached the high meadow, the view was breathtaking. The entire valley spread below them, the ranch a tiny cluster of buildings, the mountains rising on all sides like guardians. This is incredible, Harper breathed, dismounting carefully. This is where I scattered James's ashes, Raina said, the word surprising even herself. He loved this spot, said it was the closest thing to heaven he'd ever seen.
Harper moved to stand beside her, taking her hand. Thank you for bringing me here.
Thank you for riding through hell to stay alive, for fighting your way back, for choosing this life, this place. Raina turned to face her. For choosing me. Easiest choice I ever made. They stood together in the meadow, the wind carrying the scent of pine and wildflowers, and Raina felt the last piece of her grief settle into place. James would always be part of her story. That would never change. But Harper was her present and her future, and there was room in her heart for both. October brought the first snow, a light dusting that turned the world into a postcard. Harper stood on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the flakes fall. Does this scare you? Raina asked, coming to stand beside her. After what happened? A little, Harper admitted. But it's also beautiful. I can't let one terrible night take away all the other nights of wonder. She leaned into Raina's warmth. Besides, I'm not alone anymore. That makes all the difference. They'd been officially together for 6 months now, living as partners in every sense. Harper's novel was finished, submitted to publishers, generating interest. Her hip was nearly fully healed. She'd never run marathons, but she could ride and walk and live without constant pain. The nightmares about dying alone had faded, replaced by dreams of the future. I've been thinking, Harper said, about making this permanent. This is permanent. You live here. You work here. Your horse lives here. I mean, officially permanent. Legal permanent. Harper turned to face Raina, nervous but determined. I want to marry you. Raina's breath caught. Is this a proposal? It's a pre-proposal. A proposal announcement. The actual proposal is going to be much better planned, with romance, and probably a ring that isn't imaginary. Raina kissed her, cutting off the nervous rambling. When they broke apart, she was smiling.
Yes, Raina said simply. I haven't actually proposed yet. I just said I was thinking about it. Well, I'm answering anyway. Yes. To whatever romantic proposal you're planning. To making this legal and official. To spending the rest of my life with you. Raina cupped Harper's face in her hands. Yes to all of it. Harper's laugh was joy and relief mixed together. You're ruining my carefully planned moment. You can still do the romantic proposal. I'll act surprised. You're terrible at acting. Then you'll have to be very convincing. They stood on the porch as the snow fell around them, planning a future that had seemed impossible 8 months ago. Two women brought together by a storm, bound by survival, choosing each other again and again in the quiet moments that followed. The actual proposal came 2 weeks later, on a clear November evening. Harper led Raina to the barn where Ash was waiting, groomed and beautiful, wearing a new bridle with silver conchos that caught the light. Remember this? Harper asked, touching the bridle. The one she was wearing when she brought you to me? I remember everything about that night. Look closer at the conchos. Raina leaned in and saw that one of them had been engraved. 2 names, Raina and Harper. And below that, a date, the night of the storm. The night we met, Harper said. The night you saved my life. The night everything changed. She pulled a small box from her pocket and opened it, revealing a simple silver band with a small diamond. Nothing flashy, just perfect. I know you already said yes, but I want to do this properly. Harper took a breath. Raina Calloway, you rode through a blizzard for a stranger. You kept me alive through the longest night of my life. You taught me that taking risks is worth it, that love is worth it, that choosing to live instead of just survive is worth it. Will you marry me? Raina was crying, which she absolutely had not planned on. Yes, always yes. Harper slipped the ring on her finger and they stood together in the barn, surrounded by horses and hay and the simple beauty of a life built together. Ash nickered approvingly and Dakota snorted from his stall. Their blessing, Raina chose to believe. They set a date for spring, a small ceremony with close friends and family. Diana cried through the entire thing. Ed gave Raina away with gruff affection, and Ash wore flowers in her mane as the unofficial maid of honor. When the minister asked if there were any objections, the only sound was the wind through the pines and the distant call of a hawk. Montana witnessed their vows with the same indifference it showed all human drama, vast, beautiful, and eternal. I promise to ride through storms with you, Raina said when it was her turn. To be your steady ground when you need it, and your adventure when you want it.
To love you through every season, every challenge, every joy, for as long as we both shall live. Harper's vows were no less heartfelt. I promise to never stop fighting, to choose you every day, in every way, to build a life with you that honors the second chance we've been given, to love you with the same courage you showed me that terrible, beautiful night in the storm. They exchanged rings, Raina's matching Harper's, and kissed as wives for the first time. The small gathering erupted in applause and cheers, and someone released balloons that climbed into the endless Montana sky. That night, alone in their home, legally and officially now, they lay in bed talking about the future. I sold the novel, Harper said, the news she'd been holding all day. Publishing deal came through this morning. They're calling it a powerful story of survival and second chances. That's incredible. I'm so proud of you. The dedication page is already written for Raina, who rode through the storm, and for Ash, who brought us together. Raina felt her throat tighten with emotion. That's perfect. There's more. They want me to do a book tour next year. Reading, interviews, the whole thing, which means being away from the ranch sometimes. Is that okay? Of course it's okay. I'll come with you when I can, cheer you on from home when I can't. We'll make it work. You're not worried I'll miss the ranch life? That I'll want to go back to the city? Raina considered the question seriously. No, because this isn't about the ranch or the city. It's about us. Wherever we are, that's home. Harper kissed her softly. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just had to almost die for me to prove it. Next time I need wisdom, maybe we could skip the near-death experience. Deal. They fell asleep wrapped around each other, the future bright and uncertain, and theirs to write. Months became years. Harper's book became a bestseller, then a second book, then a third. Raina expanded the ranch, taking on more cattle, more horses, building something sustainable and successful. They traveled when Harper's career demanded it, but always came home to Montana, to the mountains and the endless sky. On the 5th anniversary of the storm, they rode back to the meadow where Raina had scattered James's ashes. Harper could make the climb easily now, her hip fully healed, only the faintest limp remaining as a reminder of how close she'd come to death. Do you ever wonder how different things would be if the storm hadn't hit? Harper asked. If I hadn't fallen, if Ash hadn't found you? Sometimes, but I don't dwell on it. We got here. That's what matters. I like to think we would have found each other eventually, in some other way, some other storm. Maybe. Or maybe this was always how it was meant to happen, the universe putting the right people in the right place at the right time. They stood together in the meadow, older and wiser and scarred in ways both visible and invisible. The wind carried the scent of coming winter, the promise of seasons turning. I'm glad you rode into that storm, Harper said quietly. I'm glad you sent Ash to find me. I'm glad we survived. I'm glad we did more than survive. I'm glad we learned to live again. They rode back to the ranch as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Ash and Dakota knew the way home by heart now, carrying their riders through the familiar landscape with easy confidence. At the ranch, lights glowed warm in the windows. Ed's truck was parked in the yard. He'd promised to help with the new fence line tomorrow. Diana was visiting next week. The cattle were fed and healthy. The horses were content. Everything was exactly as it should be. Inside, Raina built a fire while Harper made dinner. They'd done this dance 1,000 times now, each knowing their role without needing to discuss it. When the food was ready, they sat together at the table, holding hands while they said grace. Not to any higher power, but to the simple fact of being alive, together, grateful. To storms that change everything, Raina said, raising her glass. To the courage to ride through them, Harper added. To horses that won't give up. To women who refuse to die alone. To second chances. To home. They drank and kissed and held each other close as the fire crackled and the Montana night wrapped around them like a promise kept. The storm had tried to kill them both in different ways, but instead it had brought them together, had forged something unbreakable from the worst moments of their lives. They'd learned that survival wasn't enough. You had to choose to truly live. You had to risk your heart, ride into the unknown, Trust that someone would be waiting on the other side. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, that someone would ride through a blizzard to save you. Not because they had to, but because they chose to. Because in the end, that's what love was. Choosing each other again and again through every storm life brought. Choosing connection over isolation, hope over fear, together over alone. They'd survived the worst night of their lives. And now, together, they were building the best life they could imagine. One day at a time, one choice at a time, one storm-forged promise at a time, home.